Greetings, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. So this is a video about Boris Johnson's Brexit strategy. Well, Bojo has been at the helm for just over a month. And since he became Prime Minister, he is pursuing his typically high-risk strategy for Brexit because that's the sort of person he is, a gambler by nature. And it's been a case of brinksmanship. And he said he's willing to leave the European Union without an agreement. Now, Theresa May said the same, but the thing is, it rang false coming from her, because everybody knows she's a very circumspect sort of person, a plodder, a bit of a mediocrity perhaps. Safe pair of hands supposedly. Whereas Bojo, well, he's the polar opposite, a disruptor, a bull in the china shop, and he's gone about it with his characteristic ebullience and brio. But then Bojo, as usual, has overpromised, said that he's virtually certain to reach a deal with the European Union, which is a major exaggeration. There's some sort of chance of it, but the clock is ticking. And there's, my goodness, there's only about 65 days left. So he's wisely said that Whitehall has got to make contingency plans for leaving the European Union without a deal. And of course, this should have been done 3 years ago, and Theresa May started doing it belatedly. One of the things that was criminally irresponsible about David Cameron is in the run-up to the referendum in 2016, he refused to order the Mandarinate to plan for the eventuality that the Brexit was going to go ahead at all, with an agreement, let alone without an agreement, because he didn't want to make Brexit seem at all credible, at all likely to happen. And that was grossly partisan and an utterly wrong thing to do. And it's partly the reason why the UK is in some difficulties lately. So as you can see, that Brexit has been undermined by the deep state, civil servants who selectively leaked documents which reflect discredit on the idea of leaving without a deal and lay out the doomsday scenario. Well, the worst possible consequences that could come to pass if the UK leaves the European Union without an agreement. There are obviously various different scenarios, more rosier ones that they're not leaking. So they're doing everything they can to stop it, because the EU is bureaucracy writ large. Unsurprisingly, bureaucrats like that. It has sort of permanent policies. It takes more and more power out of the hands of politicians and indeed the people, because their regulations in the EU and decisions and so on. It's the sort of thing they like. A great deal of secrecy, and they're guaranteed more jobs. And civil servants, you know, they tend to be university educated and beyond, middle class or indeed upper middle class, often living in and around London. This is the demographic which is most Remain. The BBC is very against it, everybody knows that. Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England, I know he's Canadian, he wasn't allowed to vote, but he's constantly lied to us, saying how absolutely catastrophic it's going to be, and it hasn't happened in the last 3 years. So the man is obviously grossly incompetent. He should have been given the heave-ho ages ago. If he was giving some sort of objective statement, that'd be all right. But he's got it so badly wrong that he's clearly trying to intervene in the political arena. So Bojo, what's he going to do? The default setting is to leave the European Union. Remember that EU Withdrawal Act was passed, and that was not conditional. There'd be an agreement. Is to leave the European Union, whether with an agreement or not. That was passed by Parliament, so it is the will of Parliament to leave it. So Bojo is now flirting with the idea of proroguing Parliament for up to 5 weeks. So Parliament wouldn't be meeting, so it couldn't pass some sort of last-minute resolution to prevent the UK leaving the EU, or at least delay it again. It's already been delayed twice. And obviously, the more delay goes on, the less chance it's going to happen, because the demographics are shifting towards Remain. Remember, 48% of people voted Remain 3 years ago. The opinion polls shows Remain on about 55% now. Remember, last time, the referendum, the opinion polls overrated Remain by 4%. But even if they're overrating Remain by 4% now, their Remain would still be on 51%. And obviously, the Leavers on average are older than the Remainers. So people in their 80s are dying off, are mostly Leavers. People in their teens who are reaching voting age are mostly Remainers, and on and on. And people say, well, we've tried for 3 years, we just can't do it, we can't get an agreement, so just give up on the idea. Or say, oh, there have been all these falsehoods told by the Leave campaign, including Bojo, which have been exposed. Therefore, we were sold a pup, sold it on a bogus prospectus. We need to scotch the whole idea. This is the discourse coming out of the Remain side. So can Bojo prorogue Parliament? I don't see why not. It happens twice a year anyway. So it's just been happening another time out of the ordinary sink of prorogations. And the Labour government in 1948, they prorogued Parliament for a while because they couldn't get a piece of legislation through. You go back to Simon Pitt the Younger, he prorogued Parliament twice for up to 6 months. So this is precedented. There's no reason why it shouldn't happen. I'm not saying I think there's something that's lovely we ought to do regularly. So Theresa May, she attempted a softly approach. She was a very cautious sort of person, perhaps excessively so. That approach failed. She was forced to backtrack on promises. She'd made some contradictory ones, selling the same camel twice at least, saying to the Democratic Unionist Party Northern Ireland will be treated the same as the rest of the UK, and then agreeing to the backstop, which is precisely not what she said would happen, as in treating Northern Ireland differently to the rest of the UK. So she had her red lines, which she crossed. She was made to eat humble pie again and again, and kept raising the threshold for humiliation. Now, she said that a no deal was better than a bad deal. However, she signed a fairly bad agreement, and Parliament rejected it thrice. Not by that much the last time. One more heave she thought might have got her over the line. I would, with a heavy of heart, have voted for that agreement in December last year, because then Brexit would have been accomplished, the UK would have been out of the European Union in March, and commerce would have been able to continue unhindered, and so on, and the United Kingdom might have been able to renegotiate some areas of this, reach more palatable deals over the long term. But that would have been that. And the worst prognostications of the Remain doomsayers who said leaving the EU was going to be cataclysmic would not have come to pass. Even they couldn't have pretended that with that agreement in place. Anyway, so Bojo is also rejecting the backstop, saying Northern Ireland has to be treated the same as the rest of the United Kingdom. Why is he saying that? Why does he care? He never cared about Northern Ireland very much before. It's only got 3% of the UK population and not one single Conservative MP. The Conservatives tried to make a breakthrough there in 2010, but failed, with their Conservative Party and the LC Unionist Party more or less merging, call themselves New Force. It's because the Conservatives now got a majority of 1 in the House of Commons, and some Conservative MPs are extreme Remainers. So what's he going to do? He really relies on those 10 Democratic Unionist Party parliamentarians. So he's rejecting the backstop. The backstop is the idea is that Northern Ireland remains in regulatory alignment with the European Union until and unless an agreement can be reached with the EU to the contrary. Okay, it's the UK's only land border with the European Union, the Republic of Ireland. We're an EU member state. And remember that a majority of people in Northern Ireland voted Remain. So the EU doesn't want the UK to leave without an agreement either, because I thought it was £39 billion that the United Kingdom was going to agree to pay, but then I'm reading it's 30 billion. I'm not sure what the figure is, but it's a huge sum of money. That's the UK is providing 20% of the EU's budget, so it's the second biggest net contributor, the largest one being Germany. If the UK leaves without paying this valedictory payment, well, that would blow a massive hole in the EU's budget. So what they're going to do? Increase taxes, reduce spending, increase borrowing, a combination of 2 or 3 of these things. And they obviously want the Irish border sorted out. And the thing is, any border is only as good as its weakest point. And that was a problem with the common travel area. Obviously, people are entering the EU in places where there's a porous border and then getting all the way across the EU without any checks. It's very easy for them. So supposing some product is banned in the European Union, if it can get from the UK into the Republic of Ireland very easily, then it's in the EU. It can get all around the EU very easily, or likewise people. Now Boris Johnson said that free movement ends on the 31st of October this year, because that's the date the UK is leaving the European Union. Well, why wouldn't it do? Because that's it. The whole free movement of people thing came with the EU. Now, what happened with EU member states, or even before the EU was there as such, the European Economic Community, is the UK allowed people to come as tourists for up to 180 days a year, often for students, especially on short courses like language courses, for at least 90 days a year, things like that. So they're not going to be required visas to come from Italy or Poland or Cyprus or wherever it is. But the whole free movement said is you can come and live here without filling out a single form. Just come and get a job and stay permanently if you wish. Likewise, British people can go to Portugal or Austria, wherever it is, and just stay there as long as they want. They have the right to work. but that will be coming to an end unless there's some sort of agreement to the contrary. And well, why wouldn't it do? And ideally, that would have been part of an agreement. Why do people vote to leave? All sorts of reasons. But one of them is because of excessive immigration. Now, this excessive immigration to the UK was partly the United Kingdom's own stupid fault under Tony Blair. 2004, 10 new countries joined the European Union. Poland, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, Cyprus, Malta, Hungary. Have I forgotten a few? And I shan't list them all. Oh, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. Now, most EU member states said we're going to phase in your right to come. You won't have it immediately. After 5 years you'll have the right to come, but we're going to limit the number of people who can come. And Blair's Labour government, they moronically said no limitations whatsoever. The only other EU member states did likewise were the Republic of Ireland. We had a booming economy at the time, and I think it's Sweden. So, and the Blair government hugely underestimated the number of people who come. It was moronically incompetent. They thought it was going to be something like 20,000 people. In fact, it ended up being 800,000 people. I think I'm talking about in the first year. So lots of people from other EU member states came. I'm not saying they're bad people, and if I was in their situation, I would have done likewise. And in some ways, they've made a splendid contribution. A few of them have been bad, but you could have too much of a good thing. Immigration is not an unmixed blessing. So because there was excessive immigration, this caused a bit of a backlash, which partly led to that. If the United Kingdom had done it in a sensible way, phased it in, a reasonable level of immigration, as much as society could absorb it, that would have been all right. So, I've got to say, London's got to take some of the blame for that. You can't lay it all on the EU. So, anyway, Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, she appears open to renegotiation. But she's a lame duck, and she's shaking in public. I'm not sure what it is, this disease. Is it Parkinson's or something like that? She's standing down as Chancellor very soon. She's held that position since 2005, and another woman's taking over. But Emmanuel Macron, the French president, he said very firmly, no. And the European Union said it's just not open for a negotiation. We are fed up to the back teeth of this. I can see why they're sick of it. For 3 years it's been going on. They've got other issues to deal with. Are they going to admit Albania, other member states, or Georgia, or things like that? And the United Kingdom, they feel has been a spoiled child, has taken over so much of their time, and they were generous to the UK, giving the United Kingdom 2 extensions. On the other hand, the United Kingdom has still been paying into the EU since March. And the other thing is, there's a serious chance that the United Kingdom is not going to leave. The longer it's delayed, people might get fed up of it and just move on from that. Time has come and gone. The Remainers in the EU and the Remainers in the UK are plotting together, what are we going to do to scupper this whole Brexit thing? And remember the European elections back in May, the two parties that did best, the Brexit party, were hardline leavers, and indeed the Liberal Democrats, who are vowed to prevent it. So Bojo suggested to the Republic of Ireland could he negotiate directly with them, but Dublin said, no, we're not going to negotiate with London bilaterally. Republic of Ireland were part of a team of 27. Well, there's strength in numbers. It's an EU issue, not just an Irish issue. So Boris Johnson said there'll be no early election, but he's ahead in the polls. He's on 42%, the Conservative Party. That's just where the Conservative Party was in 2017. That was a result of the general election. Labour's well below 42%. Labour's got this incoherent policy. People are deeply dissatisfied with Jeremy Corbyn. You ask voters what was the single greatest thing Labour could do to make themselves more electable, they'll say change the leader. So he's been there and he's no longer inspiring people. He's a bit of a fuddy-duddy. He just doesn't seem credible. So Bojo might think, well, reading the tea leaves, the propitious moment is now. It would augur well to call a snap election because he's made promises which are going to be impossible to fulfil, like just how tremendous this is going to be, Brexit, and these are going to be very easy trade deals. So I think people are very likely to be disappointed if they believe that. So you have to be a little bit bold. Fortune favours the brave. If Gordon Brown had called an election the moment he became Prime Minister, he would have won comfortably, but he bottled it. And you remember at the time, Bojo wrote a column in which he absolutely excoriated Brown for his cowardice and arrogance in not going to the country. And obviously Bojo has done just what Brown did. But on the other hand, there are some serious obstacles to the Conservatives winning an election right now, at least winning it outright. Because a lot of people who voted for Brexit will be irate. Why hasn't it happened? We had the referendum 3 years ago. We had an election about it 2 years ago, and you didn't do it. The whole thing is May going to the country early, and she said she wouldn't, was to give herself a mandate. But you remember how that turned out. So this would be a major problem. And remember, several Conservative MPs have defected, formed this this Change UK party. Reminds me of Renew in Ireland, Reboot Ireland, which went nowhere fast. The Liberal Democrats have been buoyed up by this energetic young leader, Jo Swinson, the first woman to lead the party. She's only 38. The SNP aren't doing that badly in Scotland. Labour, well, they got 40% last time, probably wouldn't do so well this time. But there's the Brexit Party, which will be taking away a lot of votes from the Conservative and Unionist Party. So, on the other hand, Bojo thinks, well, shall I just call the election now before the solids hit the fan? Of course, he'd be reneging on his word, but he does that kind of thing all the time. You know, he throws out promises like confetti. He's utterly untrustworthy. So Brexit is sure to cause economic dislocation, at least in the short term. How severe that is a moot point. So that's why it'd be another reason, well, let's do it now before people experience difficulties. But Labour is chomping at the bit. There's one last triumph for Corbyn. He'd like to have an election now, because if there's no election before Christmas, I think his party will boot him out in the new year. Anyway, there's this Fixed Terms Parliament Act brought in under Cameron, 5-year parliaments. However, the House of Commons can vote to have an early election, and in 2017 they did that. It can't just be by a simple majority, it has to be a 2/3 majority. Well, is an opposition going to vote against election? Of course not. They want election now. Do you want Tory rule to continue if you're a Labour MP? No, you don't. You want the chance to come in straight away. And if you're voting against, people say, why? Are you scared? Are you going to lose? So perhaps the whole idea of having fixed-term parliaments is nonsensical, and it goes against the grain of the British Constitution. You're not going to want to prolong Tory rule if you're an opposition MP at the moment. So there's also been a plot to oust Bojo as Prime Minister. It wouldn't succeed amongst the Conservative Party. Just remember that a clear majority of Conservative MPs voted for him, had a minority of Conservative MPs and MPs of other parties, and Jo Swinson, leader of the Liberal Democrats, was in on this conspiracy, and she spoke about Ken Clarke, the father of the House, becoming Prime Minister, as in the longest-serving male MP, Harriet Harman, the mother of the House, who's a Labour MP, and Ken Clarke, you know, he tried thrice to get the Conservative leadership. Remember, over 20 years ago, Alan Clark, MP, another Tory, said Ken Clarke is a pudgy life insurance liability. Well, of these men, Ken Clarke and Alan Clark, no relations, only one of them is still alive. There he is, Ken Clarke, at the age of 79, despite being hugely obese and smoking cigars. Does a lot for his health. I suppose it's wearing hush puppies, rumpled suits, and going to Ronnie Scott's jazz club. That is the elixir of youth. So people talk about an SNP Lib Dem Labour coalition. When the Conservatives were forming a coalition with the Lib Dems, of course, Labour panned this, saying it was a coalition of chaos. Well, it certainly wasn't. It was 5 years of stable government. So this conspiracy, I don't think it will succeed, but it's got a reasonable chance of succeeding. And would they even put in Corbyn as a temporary Prime Minister to prevent Brexit? We don't have such a post as temporary Prime Minister. You're either Prime Minister or you're not. How temporary? For like 1 day? 100 days? What? And temporary things have a habit of becoming permanent. So I don't think it's going to work. It shows how desperate they are. And they're running out of time for this parliamentary coup. So what is Bojo's grand plan? Well, 52% of people voted for Brexit. And if there is an election this autumn, as it seems probable, Bojo wants to hoover up as much of that 52% for the Conservative Party as possible. Now, that's not going to work because some of these people who voted Brexit in the referendum are dyed-in-the-wool Labour voters, people who have died off, and some of them are just not interested in party politics. Turnout was quite high and wouldn't vote for any party, usually. A few people who voted Brexit have changed their minds, saying, oh, well, Project Fear, it's worked on me, it will be calamitous. So that's not really going to work for him, and some of these Brexit voters are going to vote for the Brexit Party. You know, we gave you a chance, you screwed up. No, you betrayed us. And of course, by being such a hardline Brexiteer, some people who voted Conservative previously will go against him. There are some people who were, like I said, the Theresa May position, Remainer turned Brexiteer. I wanted to remain, all right, leave one, I accept that, I will execute the popular will. And these people then might be put off by overly strident Brexiteer rhetoric from the Conservative Unionist Party. So anyway, as I say, people are going to be irate that the Conservative Party has failed to implement Brexit 3 years after the referendum, especially when they had an election in between. So, the longer it goes on, well, the closer we get to a departure day, the harder it's going to be to stop. Remember, in September is party conference season. So these parties, they informally coordinate it. Lib Dems have their conference 1 week, then Labour, then Conservatives. Well, not necessarily in that order, but they don't clash. Now, there is a way to bring back Parliament. It's on recess. It's on a holiday right now. You can bring it back early in an emergency situation. But it really will be fright night for the Conservative Party if the United Kingdom doesn't leave the EU on the 31st of October, because that is the deadline. So that's his strategy, to play hardball, to show that he really is willing to leave without a deal, slightly frighten the EU, and then they'll give him a palatable deal. In the Republic of Ireland, it would have made sense for us to try and offer the UK a reasonably attractive deal, because if the United Kingdom leaves without an agreement, that will have a major impact on our economy in the Republic of Ireland, more so than any other EU member state. It will damage the UK economy as well. How much? I don't know. I don't think severely. There, of course, are going to be some teething problems in a fairly major change. How long will these go on, and how soon will the UK sort it out? I really don't think we're going to stop flying here and there. And they're saying we're going to run out of medicines and fresh vegetables. Again, there's a palpable lack of panic. Even the Remainers have got bored of disseminating these scare stories. So that's it. And would he be willing to leave without agreement? He would. But the thing is, because he is all about himself, such an egomaniac, Bojo's the kind of person who could turn on a dime and perform a volte-face at the last possible moment. I don't think he'll do it. If the United Kingdom in the end chose not to leave, Brussels would breathe a huge sigh of relief, would be elated. They say that disaster has been averted. They would welcome the UK back in and say, but you're never allowed to leave. Probably, whether the UK leaves or not, the EU is going to change their constitution. Sorry, Treaty of Lisbon, to say you're not allowed to leave. The right of secession is gone. There might be something like you can only leave with the permission of all the other EU states, because they don't want the disruption of their headache this has caused for the past 3 years happening again.